Hey everyone, my name is Martin and today we're going to be discussing the production of Flowers by Miley Cyrus. Starting off from the beginning of the verse, immediately greeting us is a blend of instruments and synths playing the main chords and riff of the record. And the driving force is the bass guitar, which almost serves the purpose of playing a melody rather than just a bass line. I'm a big user of Contact, and there's a really great bass guitar expansion called the Scarby Rickenbacker bass. I'm using the Halloween preset as I find it to be similar to the bass we hear in the original, specifically within the plucky characteristics of it. We'll need to make some additional changes though to bring it closer. I'm beginning the mixer chain with an instance of Guitar Rig, which adds an immediate depth and warmth to the guitar through the Basic Bass Pro preset. I'm then applying some compression to tame any peaks within the low end while still retaining enough body. I have a moderately slow attack and I have the release set to automatic. I also have the threshold set a bit dramatically as we can see how much ducking it is doing between each note being played, and this allows for the guitar to sit much more pleasantly in the mix after the Guitar Rig instance we've applied. I'm also adding an EQ that has a steep reduction using the dynamic EQ function, which I've automated in order to ensure the bass does not reveal too much low end in the verse, as we want to save this for the chorus for a bigger impact. I've also rolled off a lot of the high end as we don't need that, and this will therefore help clear way for some of the additional synths that play in the verse. I'm also adding an instance of RBass, a bass enhancement tool, to provide additional body after the compression. And finalizing the chain, we have Magma BB Tubes by Waves, whose purpose is to bring the guitar more forward in the mix and to create some dimension within the sound. And finally, I'm also using FabFilter Pro MB, which is a multiband compressor that I'm linking to the kick within the chorus. And the purpose of this is to duck the low end of the bass whenever the kick hits, to allow room for the kick each time the kick is being played. Now, the vibe of the verse is overall dreamy and mellow, and to obtain this sound, I'm using a couple of different plugins and synth types. Introducing the pad, I'm using a sound from the Retro Machines MK2 expansion called the Matrix Pad 4, and the overall sound of this patch is quite warm and dreamy, and this will help set the foundation for achieving the rest of the atmospheric ambience we're after. Following suit, I am layering the pad with a guitar from the Electric Sunburst Deluxe expansion found in Contact. Now, as it currently stands, the guitar is not where you want it to be. However, here's what we can do in the processing to acquire a more soothing and calming sound. I'm also using a Rhodes patch from Keyscape as an additional layer to our pad and guitar combo. I'm beginning its chain with an equalizer, taking out both some of the lows and highs to create a darker sound, followed by an instance of Mellow-Fi by Arturia to add some tape noise, flutter, and an aged effect to the sound. I then have an S1 to widen the sound and both of these effects. And lastly, I'm using some subtly applied reverb to help draw out some more of the sound with an extra long decay. So let's listen to what we got so far. I'd also like to touch on the intro riff we hear at the start of the song, which uses our guitar and Rhodes sounds, playing an arpeggiation of the notes C, G, B, and E, which is the C major 7 chord. And what we have is a wobbly, pulsating effect that is really enticing to the ear. And to create this, I'm using some tremolo on our guitar, which creates this rhythmic effect we hear. And I'm layering that with a wobbling rattle effect found on Splice, which helps further articulate what we hear from the original by using Manipulator to increase the sample's pitch and formant through an automation clip. And played together, this is the result we get. So we have our main elements of the verse and the intro, but there are some additional nuances I'd like to highlight. First, we have an additional bass layer that plays the first note of the bass line in each bar, and I'm using Diva for this sound, specifically the cable bass preset, which I slightly tweaked. Additionally, in the pre-chorus, we introduce a woodblock sound that plays the following melody. And this one is being played in conjunction with a filtered bongo loop and a snare to add a sense of movement and to signal to the listener that we're going somewhere. And finally, I wanted to highlight this distorted fill synth, which leads the song into the chorus, where I'm using retro MK2 machines again, this time using the Matrix 1 lead. Now, there's a few effects going on to give it that distorted feel. An instance of Magma BB Tubes begins the chain, which helps add body and drive the sound more forward in the mix. Then there's an EQ to roll off some low end and to boost some highs, an S1 for some width, and a Maserati GDI to further exaggerate the distortion effect. Also note that I am automating the synth's volume level using this instance of Fruity Balance at the end of the chain, which I'm using to roll off the sound's tail so it's completely silent before the chorus starts playing. So as this distorted fill synth has guided us to the chorus, we are greeted by a lot more drums as well as a more pronounced bass line. So let's begin with the drums, as they are an integral part in what makes the chorus sound so intriguing. We have a kick, a snare, and some different types of head and percussion loops, which all melt together to create an interesting groove. I'm starting with this kick, which can be found on Splice in the Neon sample pack. It's big, it's punchy, and it's exactly what we need to set our foundation for the rest of the elements. I'm processing this kick with some EQ, rolling off a bit of the lows, as we will layer this kick with an additional sample that will take responsibility for the low end. I'm also using a DS10 drum shaper to bring out the attack and mid-range of the kick further, also increasing the sustain to generate an even more natural and lengthier sounding effect. Also, I'm using some compression to even out some of the peaks, which will help ensure that the kick still pokes through the mix while not being overbearing. Next in our drums, we have our additional kick layer, and there's quite a bit going on in this chain. We first have an instance of R bass to help bring out the sub of the kick more. Next we have some compression that is working to tame out the difference in volume between the highest and lowest peaks of the kick in order to have the kick sit better in the mix. Then I really enjoy using the DS10 as a fast solution to bringing out the sound more. And for this case we have it to boost the attack of our kick as well as decrease a bit of the decay and overall length of the kick, creating a tighter, grippier mix. Then we have some minimal EQ rolling off some of the sub portion of the low end, as well as a subtle boost around 60 Hz for the kick to punch through more. And I'm then finishing the chain with an instance of Magma BB tubes, applying ever so subtly, allowing the kick to poke through a touch more. Secondly, we have our snare, which is another integral component to the foundation of our drums. And this snare in particular is being made up of two layers, which both play separate roles. First, we have our punch layer, which provides the punch portion of the snare. And to make this snare stand out more, we're using the 1-Up Louder plugin by Waves, which brings the snare much more forward and makes it beefier. We also have a DS10 to increase the sustain of the snare, and an EQ to subtly bring out some more of the highs. And second, there's also our crunch snare, which provides the crunch to our snare layer. And on this particular snare, I'm not using any effects as I'm quite happy with the way it sounds. However, both of these samples are being linked to our snare bus, which has a tape effect, some saturation, and Magma BB tubes to really poise the snare to the center of the mix and bring to the listener's attention. And then there are also some other important loops which provide groove to the chorus overall, creating movement and interesting to the listener. Continuing in the chorus, many of the instruments that were introduced in the verse already carry out into the chorus, specifically the bass guitar acting as our lead focus and the pad Rhodes combo playing the dreamy chord stabs. Then, as we approach the second half of the chorus, we are being greeted by these beautiful and emotional strings that provide a great complement to Miley's voice. And I'm layering the strings using both a left and a right double in order to add some spice and body, which in turn creates a much more interesting and full sound. And for more about this technique, please be sure to watch my doubling technique video, which I've linked below. I'm also applying a couple of effects here, one being the 1-Up feather, which helps make the strings sound more bold. I then have some EQ going on, taming some of the highs, rolling off some of the low end, and boosting a little in the low mid-range to provide more warmth. And lastly, there's an S1 to widen the sound a bit, as well as some reverb to add dimension. And with that said, let's now listen to the final result of our rendition of Flowers by Miley Cyrus. So this was a really fulfilling and fun song to recreate. And to continue the fun, please go ahead and download the free project file, the MIDI files, and the stems down below. So you can study everything at your own pace and use any elements you might like. Next week we'll be covering a very cool EDM track by a highly regarded artist, someone you may know and who might not be a stranger to the channel. And the first person to guess this artist will receive an early copy. And with that said, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next week.